1, 2, 1, 2. All right, we are hot. Oh, well, good morning. There are lots of us here this morning. Place is really packed. If you're joining us online, you probably better stay home. You barely find a seat here. I'm just kidding. I'm joking. It is Labor Day weekend, so we have a lot of folks traveling, a lot of folks out of town, and that's okay. We hope that if you're joining us remotely because you're traveling somewhere, first of all, thank you. But we're glad you're here. We are glad to be here. Lots of things going on. I think the KFC's aren't they off on a retreat? And KFC's off on a retreat, and I don't know. Everybody's traveling for Labor Day, and there's all kind of stuff. But anyway, we're glad you're here. We're in the book of Matthew, chapter 9. If you're joining us for the first time, we are plodding our way through Matthew, and that's okay because we're just taking our time and really experiencing everything that this has to offer. We are in the different section of chapter 9, and there's two stories here, but before we get into those, I want to set the stage a little bit because I think there's something remarkable in this section that we kind of gloss over because we don't get it. We don't get how revolutionary Jesus was. We don't get how his attitudes and the way he interacted with people was so different from anybody of his time because we live on the other side of the cross. We live on the other side of Jesus. But before Jesus, it was very, very different. And we don't get that. And so I want to see if we can understand a little bit of the culture, okay? I'm going to read you some things that are, these are quotes from various rabbis who were the teachers, the leaders of Judaism, who would have been the foremost thinkers, who would have given they would have given their statements as statements of rules and regulations, statements of they wouldn't have called it law, but they would have, you've heard preachers talk about how they built the hedge around the law so that people would never get close to breaking the law, and they would kind of make commentaries on the law, and those became rules themselves. I want to read you some rabbinical statements that are all from around the period of time when Jesus would have lived. And so you can get a feeling for the culture, and maybe we will see by that how actually revolutionary and different Jesus was. Rabbi Baya ben Asher says, "The female is irrelevant in creation. She is only like a leech, clinging to the main thing, the man taken from it and for its usage. She is made special for its usage as one of his special parts for his own usage." Not making this up. A different one says, "Woe to him whose children are females." Midrash Genesis Rabbah 17 says, "Once Eve was created, Satan was created with her." Soda 21, "Whoever teaches his daughter Torah teaches her obscenity." Rabbi Levi ben Gershon says, "The woman has no more qualities than animals if she even has a brain. She was created in order to serve." That's all. We get this and we're like, wow, but that's normal in that time, okay? This is normal Jewish thought. It carries on. Later on in the Middle Ages, one of the rabbis wrote that a woman is ready to have sexual relations at age 3 and can give birth at age 12. He also declared that the husband should prevent and not allow his wife to leave the house any more than once or twice a month if needed, since the beauty of a woman comes from sitting in the corner of her house. In Jerusalem Talmud chapter 6, it is forbidden to give a woman jewelry since women are arrogant. Rabbi Yitzhak Luria says, therefore, the Ara HaKadosh, talking about an older rabbi that we read from a minute ago, would spit every time he saw a saucy woman. It was considered a great virtue to spit when you see an immodest woman. The sages warn that it's better to stay away from women. Do not speak excessively with women, for all women's conversations are lewdness. Now, one who excessively converses with a woman causes evil to himself, neglects the story of the study of Torah, and in the end inherits purgatory. Okay, that's all. Just a few samplings to get you a flavor. Now let's look at Matthew chapter 9. A ruler came in and knelt before him, saying, "My daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live." And Jesus rose and followed him with his disciples. And behold, a woman who had suffered from a discharge of blood for 12 years came up behind him and touched him, the fringe of his garment. For she said to herself, "If I only touch his garment, I will be made well." Jesus turned, and seeing her, he said, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well." And instantly the woman was made well. And when Jesus came to the ruler's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, "Go away, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But when the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl arose. Why do you think the attitude of Jesus was so remarkably different towards women than the attitudes of his time? I mean, it's this normal. Everything to dismiss women as not having any value is normal part of culture. And here comes Jesus, and very much different. Jason? Right? Jesus loved everybody. The meek will inherit the earth. Okay, I buy that. Anybody else? Because, I mean, it would have been easier and more socially acceptable to not. Right? True. Yes, I'm sorry. Exactly. It's on multiple levels. First of all, he's a synagogue leader, so, you know, Jesus is kind of a upstart rebel rabbi. He's not officially part of the system. In fact, he's probably bucking the system a little bit. This is a big deal for him to come and kneel before Jesus. This is a big deal because it goes against his religion. It goes against his livelihood. And on top of all that, we don't get that it's a big deal for him to come on behalf of his daughter. Because most rabbis would have said, "I'll let her die." I'm not exaggerating. It would have not been a big deal. Oh, it's just a daughter. Nothing to worry about. I'm not kidding. I'm not making this up. And we don't get that this guy in himself, and Mark's going to tell us his name's Jairus and all that kind of stuff. We don't get that in Matthew, but there's something here Why is this story so important that the Holy Spirit feels it necessary for it to be included in multiple gospel accounts? You know? And in one place it says that if we had that all the stories about Jesus would fill up all the books in the world, right? That there are so many stories about Jesus that aren't written down. Why was this one so important that it had to be included multiple times? Okay? It's a good question. King asked, for those of you at home, would the synagogue leader have been barred from going back home or back to the synagogue? I don't think barred, because at this time, in the story, at this place in the story, there's a lot of buzz about Jesus. He's not really an outlaw yet. I mean, I think the religious leaders consider him that way, but for the most part, the people are still so excited and so behind him that they don't directly confront him because they're afraid of the backlash. And so I don't think he would have been barred. He would probably have been frowned on. If I don't know, if I go and if next week I'm gone on Sunday because I'm doing a guest appearance at Joel Osteen's church and hanging out with Joel, I wouldn't be barred from coming back, but I'm going to tell you, most of my friends would be ripping me. Most of my preacher friends would be dogging me out about that. And they wouldn't be, you get what I'm saying? It's just like, at this point, they're not really mad at him enough to kill him. He's just kind of annoying and weird, and you know what I'm saying? I do think he would have been frowned on. He would have been looked down on. He would have been, maybe criticized for it. It does take some courage for him to do this. He's not. It's not an easy thing for him to go and ask Jesus for this. Jesus crosses a lot of boundaries here. You notice that? Looking at this story, what boundaries does Jesus cross here? Because remember, we've talked about in all this, there's that purity culture that's going through all this, and through all these stories, Jesus is continually reaching across these boundaries that he's not supposed to reach across. What boundaries do you see him crossing here? Being nice to a female. He's not supposed to talk to a woman, first of all. He's not supposed to touch a woman. He's not supposed to, really have anything to do with a woman in public. And so that's one major boundary. What else? Say that again? Brought somebody back to life. The fact that he touches the girl. He is a rabbi. At that point when he's touching her, she is dead. He is touching a dead body. That is ceremonial uncleanliness. That's one of the biggies. He didn't have to touch her. He's proved that in just the story before this. He didn't have to do that. But he did that on purpose. That's not an accident that he touches the body. There's something to that. What else? Discharge of blood. The woman is bleeding. Mark tells us, is it Mark that tells us that she's been bleeding for 12 years? I get them all confused. I know Luke doesn't mention that. Luke tells us she's been bleeding, but Mark says she'd been abused at the hands of many doctors, or something like that. Luke doesn't include that part because Luke's a doctor. But yeah, the issue of blood, that's her problem. She's bleeding, and so for her to be bleeding and to have a continual bleeding problem, she is ceremonially unclean, and everyone she touches and comes into contact with is ceremonially unclean. Most rabbis, if she would have touched them, would have lost their mind and freaked out, because not only is she a woman touching them, but she is an unclean woman touching them. I don't know. You see any other boundaries that he's crossing? I'm not fishing for any particular answers. I'm asking your opinion. We've seen the cleanliness boundary both in the issue of blood and in the touching the body. We've seen the female. He's connecting with a female, talking to a female in public, touching a female. That's all against the rules. What else, Jason? Okay, the woman at the well. Yeah, exactly. He's not supposed to be talking to her either. That was chronologically probably before. That's in John, so somewhere in there. But yeah, it still goes along with Jesus's relationship with women. Yeah, for real. He walks into somebody's house and kicks everybody out. That there's something to that. Megan, you were going to say. Mm. Absolutely. That'll preach right there. For those of you at home, Jesus always met people where they were, is what Megan said. That he was not expecting them to get it all cleaned up and to be perfect when they came to him. That you don't have to be this perfect little Christian. That Jesus was ministering to them where they are. Think about, remember, ever since the end of chapter 7, we've been talking about authority. He's exercised authority over all these things. What authority is he exercising here? What do you see? Come on, y'all, wake up. What authority is he, what is he demonstrating authority over? God's authority, but over what? Over life and death, over sin, culture, especially the purity culture, especially the rabbinical culture, the religious culture, in a number of ways, because all those things, the rules and regulations that would have kept him boxed in, he doesn't. It's not like he's deliberately bucking them. It's just like they don't apply to him, and it's not even a rebellious kind of in-your-face thing. It's just like, no, that's not a thing. You know what I'm saying? It's not like he's deliberately going, look at me, look what I can do. It's not like that. It's like that doesn't even cross his mind that he shouldn't be talking to this woman. You never see, one of the things I love is you never see Jesus worried about what anybody thinks. And all of us, even if we say we don't, have that thought at some point. All these people are looking at me right now. What am I going to say to this woman? It's like that doesn't even cross his mind. He's zero laser focuses in on her, and that's all. I mean, in the other gospels, when they're like, all these people are bumping into you, and you're going to ask who touched me? What's wrong with you? Everybody's touching you. That whole thing that both of these stories center really around desperation, and here's what I mean. We talked about just a minute ago about the synagogue ruler coming to Jesus. How weird that would be. That how desperate would you have to be to put yourself in that situation? To forget the religious connotations that we don't understand, but just the fact of going to anyone, kneeling before them and begging. I mean, as men, we don't like to ask for directions, let alone for help, let alone to humiliate myself publicly. How desperate does this guy have to be that all that stuff is out of the window? You get me? That this is his position, his reputation. And remember, in that society, saving face, reputation, honor, this is a honor-shame culture, and so honor is the most important thing. That's more important to people than life. And so for him to throw all of his honor out the window, to go and to kneel and to beg, that's a big deal. He's got to be really, really desperate. And it says a lot about his heart that he's desperate. It says even more because he's desperate for his daughter. I think it's significant. You notice in some of the other stories, it doesn't tell you the gender of the child. It just says, my child's sick. Or will you, my servant is sick. Or, you know what I'm saying? There's a reason I think that it singles out that this is a daughter. Because why? On the way, when this woman touches him, what does Jesus call her? Daughter. Mark's going to tell us that she's been bleeding for 12 years. He's going to tell us that the synagogue ruler's daughter is 12 years old. Come on, y'all. All these little coincidences, I don't buy that. The Holy Spirit doesn't do coincidences. There's a reason for all this stuff. And you know, this is the only place in Scripture anywhere where Jesus calls a woman daughter. Why do you think that is? If I say, why do you think? You can answer that one because you can't be wrong. You think what you think. There's not a wrong answer here. No, you're not allowed to think that. Hang on, I'm coming. What? Out of respect? Okay. Over here, what did you say? I'm sorry. Somebody said something. Women matter too. Yeah, daughter. Daughters are important too. I think personally, and this is, take this for what it's worth, Jeff's opinion, but I think Jesus, and I base this more on Mark's account, because Mark, he says, daughter, your faith has healed you, and then he says, my peace be with you. That's my shalom is upon you. That's basically him calling her daughter and putting his peace on her, is saying she's under my protection. Because when I walk away from here and all you people decide to stone her because she touched you and she was bleeding, because that's what's going to happen, you're now dealing with me. It's that protection. He puts his protection on her publicly because she's vulnerable. She has, I mean, this is a suicide mission. She's pushing her way through a crowd of her friends and neighbors, or neighbors at least, who would know her ailment, right? If there's somebody who's had this ailment, they can't come to church, they can't go to work, they can't go home, everything's unclean, okay? And so she would, 12 years, if she had a husband, he's gone. If she had kids, she can see them, but she can't really interact with them because they'll be unclean. She can't hold down a job because she's unclean. She can't, she can't go to church. She can't have a relationship with God because she's unclean. And so to push through this crowd of people and touch all these people, they're going to kill her because they're going to stone her because she's contaminating everybody. So this is a suicide mission. If she touches his cloak and nothing happens, it's over. This is desperation. This is her last ditch effort. There's no plan B, right? And so she's making this suicide run at Jesus, and then when she's healed, he says, now you daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. My peace go with you. My shalom be upon you. You're now under my protection. And all you people who are watching, you're going to leave her alone. What somebody say?
Hey Jeff.
Yes, Lord.
Yeah. It looks like
just because you're in the booth doesn't mean you get a mic.
It's how I get your attention.
What? Go ahead. I'm messing with you.
Sherry says Jesus accepted people for who they were and not reject people. We should do better to follow his example and not reject people.
True. Jesus didn't reject people, and we should do better and not reject people. I agree with that. The use of the daughter here is significant both in both times. We see Jesus stepping across the purity boundaries, though. When he gets to the house, he touches the dead girl. We've seen that before. But as we've seen before, Jesus is not made unclean by touching unclean things. Instead, he makes the unclean things clean. That'll preach. That's going to be a theme that carries over. I think there is a question, though, of what lessons does this story, how is this story going to inform and instruct the church today? as we profess to be disciples of Christ, as we profess to be the hands and feet of Jesus in this world, what instruction do we get from this? What should we learn from this as a body, as disciples or followers of Christ? One, not reject people. That's what Sherry said. I buy that. Jason? Love your neighbor as yourself. Okay. I buy that. Jerry? Those that are outcast by society, we need to welcome. I agree with that as well. And churches are not always real good at that, are we? I mean, let's be honest. We're not always real good at saying everybody's welcome regardless of what you look like or whatever. I'm sorry. Yes, women aren't allowed to talk. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead. We don't turn away people that come to Jesus. Oh, and that one's hard because we do that. I mean, in youth ministry, I used to get in trouble all the time because a kid wanted to be baptized, we baptized him. And people would be like, well, are you sure they know enough? That's not my job. My job is not to be the gatekeeper of the kingdom. My job is to welcome people to Jesus. And if they don't know enough, that's between them and God. I don't see anywhere in Scripture where they said, where the eunuch says, here's water, what does prevent me from being baptized? And he says, well, there's a test. And if you pass this test, then it doesn't happen. Anyway, but yeah, turning people away from Jesus who are coming to Jesus, that's hard. Because if we're honest, we do that sometimes. And so as a church, we've got to get better. Here's one thing that I think is instructive for us as a church, as churches, right? Jesus is going to the house of the ruler, right? The ruler comes to him and says, I need you. And Jesus says, okay. And he goes. He goes. Churches, we're more about come than we are about go. Does that make sense? We're all Jesus didn't say, well, I'm going to be I'm going to be speaking at this thing down the street in a couple of weeks, and why don't you just bring her there, and we'll take care of it. You know what I'm saying? Jesus is on the move. He's active. He's engaging culture. He's engaging people. He's reaching across these lines. He's always moving, and whereas our churches tend to be static, right? We tend to be, we're here, and y'all come see us. And I'm guilty. I mean, if you're listening to the game, you will hear me say on the radio, come see us. That's our ad, that's our pitch. But we should be out as well. And how do we do that? How do we get outside of the walls and get out to where the people are? Because that's what Jesus did. We sit in our building and wonder why people don't come to us, but there's nowhere where Jesus ever sits and waits for. I mean, they come to him, but he's never just saying, okay, I'm going to be in Capernaum, on this date, and y'all, yeah, or pray, and he's like, these people won't leave me alone. What would it look like today if we, like Matthew, in the story, one of the stories before this, got up and followed Jesus across the purity and religious boundaries of our day? Ooh, I know. Big question for a Sunday morning. What would it look like if the church, now when Jesus says to Matthew, come follow me, Matthew gets up, leaves his job, his career, everything, follows Jesus. That doesn't mean he leaves it permanently. I don't think that he didn't, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Zacchaeus pretty much went back to work, it looks like, but I don't know. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. We don't know. But what would it look like if the church actually followed Jesus across the boundaries that are put up in our society today? How could we do that? Nobody wants to touch that. Absolutely. Mm, right. Mm, wow. That is priceless. And for those of you at home, Megan's talking about yesterday. Our church hosted along with Junior Service League, hosted a food truck, and she made her family go. And Nathan said that he would rather have done something else. But what good am I on my own for the kingdom? What good am I for the kingdom if I'm just on my own doing things that benefit me instead of being the hands and feet of Jesus? I'm doing a horrible job of rephrasing what she just said. Steve. Ooh. Ooh. Okay. We would say that again now. We would have to change the fear of judgment. I got it. So, and that's interesting because in this story, neither of these people is worried about Jesus judging them, right? I mean, the synagogue ruler is not, he's coming to Jesus. I mean, I guess he could be expecting some judgment. I don't know. He's kind of braced for something. The woman with the issue of blood, she's probably expecting a little bit of something when he finally finds her, because she's kind of hiding out after it's over, and he's got to search for her a little bit. But yeah, getting over that fear of judgment, getting over that fear of judgment, I buy that. There are lots of lines and boundaries that exist in society, and you can think of a bunch of them right off the top of your head. But as Christians, instead of reinforcing those boundaries, I think we've got to be more like Jesus and be the ones who are reaching across those boundaries. Jesus is not content to just be like the rest of the religious groups of his day. And I think that's significant because I think sometimes we get sucked into religious culture, and in America the religious culture all says this, and so we just kind of fall in line with that. But sometimes we've got to be able to reach across that and say, no, that's not. Let's reach across this and bring in the people who need to be reached. I'm going to read you something else from another rabbinical statement. Rabbi Judah, in a midrash, you're not going to care about the name of it, but even the poorest man in Israel must not furnish less than 2 flutes and 1 woman wailer at the funeral of his wife. So when it's required by law, the minimum when a man's wife dies is that he furnishes 2 flute players and 1 paid mourner. That's a woman wailer, not someone who hunts whales, but one who wails, who moans, who mourns loudly. That's their job. Now, the previous sentence in that talks about He is responsible for her burial, that these are the explicit biblical burial responsibilities. There's nothing in any midrash that gives any kind of specifics, specific burial responsibilities for children. But you would think, with her being the age of 12, and I told you earlier, there's one where it says a woman is able to bear children and to be married at the age of 12, that she is considered sort of an adult in that culture. And so we're assuming that that's probably part of this, part of what's going on here. Girls could become betrothed at age 12, and so there is a place where the responsibility shifts from the father to the husband. But we're assuming, because this is the father, that that responsibility is still on him. There were at least, we know that the word for flute is plural, so there's at least 2 flute players. The words used for the mourners constitutes a number of people, the wailers and the weepers. There's a number of people mourning, and so what you kind of get is that there's all these people, the flute players, the professional wailers and lamenters, that are all present at the death of this little girl. But we know that he's gone, right? It's his responsibility, but he's not there. Mark tells us that she's still alive when he leaves the house, right? In Mark's story, they meet him on the road and says, your daughter's died. And people will be like, well, why are they different? That just shows that it's just eyewitness accounts are different. We've talked about this before. If we're leaving today and there's an accident after church, everybody's going to describe it. You're all going to see the same thing. Everybody's going to describe it different. One person's going to say, well, I heard a lot of screeching, and then there was a big crash, and I went out to see what was happening, and that's what I saw. Somebody else is going to say, there was a red sports car that came over the hill going too fast, and they T-boned the car coming out of the church. Somebody else is going to say, well, this Corvette came around the corner. You see what I'm saying? It's a little bit different, but they're saying the same things. So don't get hung up on when, what happened, where. But so who hired these people is my point. If he's not there, it's his responsibility. She's not dead yet. So who hires them? They're there. It seems that they're aware of that this is a affluent man, that he has some form of wealth. Perhaps they're members of his synagogue, of his congregation. And so it looks like, in my opinion, take that for what it's worth, that she dies and he's gone, and so all these people just show up and take their place, playing their flutes and mourning and wailing, hoping that they get paid, because they would have to be hired. They know he's going to have to hire them. That's in the rules, right? And not the law, but in the rules. And so he's going to hire mourners and flute players. And so it would explain why all these people are in there just mourning and wailing. Jesus says she's asleep, and they all crack up laughing. Because, I mean, really, that doesn't normally happen. If go walk into the funeral home and say, oh, she's asleep. See how that turns out. No, not many people are going to laugh at you. You know what I'm saying? And so for them to go from mourning to laughing kind of shows a little bit of hypocrisy, that they're not here because they're really sad, right? They're here trying to get a buck, trying to make some money. This is why this is important. When Jesus and I'm going to call him Jairus, even though Matthew doesn't. When Jesus and Jairus arrive at his house, and Jesus drives out the mourners, okay? When Jesus kicks them all out, this is a critical moment for Jairus, because by allowing Jesus to drive out the crowd, he is possibly denying payment to these people, okay? Because if the girl is not dead, then he's not responsible for paying mourners and flute players because she's not dead. He didn't hire them. They just showed up. You see what I'm saying? This is a big moment where saving face. We don't get that because we don't live in the shame, honor culture that is here. And so honor and is more important than anything, including life, to these people. And so him losing face, right, is a big deal. And so when Jesus kicks all these people out, Jairus he's all in at that moment, because you're choosing, are you going to go with the crowd or are you going to go with Jesus? Because that's the choice. Because Jesus has the power and you're trusting him to heal your daughter, but all these people are going to be really upset with you and mad at you because you didn't fulfill what they see as your obligation to them. Now you see where that's going, though, because I think a lot of times we in churches get hung up in the same place. Because there's all the congregation and all the people, and sometimes the choice is, are you going to go with the crowd and let the crowd not be mad at you and not think less of you, or are you going to follow Jesus because Jesus is leading you in a different direction? And we don't like to admit that. That doesn't make these people bad. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. They're not doing anything wrong. In fact, they're following the rules. Them showing up and doing this is not trying to milk Jairus or anything like that. They probably saw themselves as doing him a favor, because he wasn't there to hire mourners. He's supposed to have mourners, and so they're just going to show up and mourn and do him a favor. And they will probably get paid for it. They're assuming that, we think. I mean, I don't know what's in their head. I can't promise you that. But I'm not saying they're bad, but he's got to make a choice. That, are you going to follow Jesus or are you going to follow the crowd? And I think that's significant, because I think at some point we all hit that, right? We all hit a place where we've got to choose. Are we going to go with the crowd? Are we going to go with what everybody else thinks? Or are we going to go with Jesus? I think you see it a lot right now in evangelical churches, because the crowd goes one way and you get caught up in the crowd, and nobody really thinks, is this what Jesus would do? And I think you see it a lot now in the political climate of our country. Because whatever crowd you're in goes one way or the other. And I'm not taking sides. I don't care. But whichever side you're going with, I don't think we always stop and go, what would Jesus do? Because we really don't want to. Because a lot of times Jesus wouldn't do either one. Left or right. And that makes it uncomfortable, and that makes it hard. And so let's be honest. We following Jesus is not easy. And following Jesus is going to get you places you don't necessarily want to go. But just like with this story of Jairus, following Jesus is the only place where healing is going to really come. If he follows the crowd, his daughter's dead, right? There's no coming back from that. And so, I don't know. I know I'm preaching. I'm sorry. I was going to set up a question, but we don't have time for that, because it is already time for us to end. And
see, I use a mic when I need to get your attention. Cody comes in and says, you have to put the work with the faith. Taking the step and putting in the work will brighten the eyes of others and see your faith.
Okay, I buy that. That sounds a lot like James. King, do you have your hand up? Absolutely. When he left the house. when he's going to see Jesus, he'd already made the decision. I think you're right. When most people, when you make that decision and commit, you're going to stick to it. He made that decision when he left the house, that he was going to Jesus and not trusting in the stuff that was around him. I believe that. You're absolutely right. And there's sermons in that too. Isn't that cool? All the sermons that are in these little bitty stories. We're out of time, y'all. Thank you. Good discussion this morning. We will be back here next week. You got about 15 minutes to fellowship, take care of your business, whatever you need to do. We'll be back in here to worship at 10 o'clock. Thank you.